Governor Doug Burgum, who is Trump Cabinet's Interior Secretary nominee, appeared before the Senate on 16th January for confirmation hearing. In this video, you will see top 5 most asked questions from Governor Doug Burgum and Doug Burgum responses.
Would you commit to responding to every disaster with as much support and resources possible, regardless of which state or jurisdiction the disaster is in?
Well, absolutely, but I would say I would go a step further, which is we've got to commit to, and maybe it's going to take, apparently the fire in Maui wasn't big enough, in a sense. I mean, that was horrible, 100+ lives lost, devastation that's there, but it didn't create a response nationally or at the federal level or a collaboration of states. But with this incredible, the largest ever, and when the dollars come up, this could be the most expensive wildfire, urban wildfire in the history of the country. It's probably a time for all of us together to say, what could we be doing differently? And I'm excited that Tim Sheehy is a new senator. He's the first that I know of who's actually worked as a professional firefighter on wildfire. I know that he and others are willing to work across the aisle to come up with solutions.
And Senator Sheehan and I are already working on some proposals on a bipartisan basis to improve the federal government's ability to help in situations like these.
And if I could, Senator, I would say we also have to look. It goes back to actually the grid, because if a wildfire, whether it's in North Dakota or California, you need 3 things. You need oxygen, you need fuel load, and you need a spark. And in both cases, in North Dakota and in whatever, when you have high winds, those sparks can come from above ground power lines coming in contact with vegetation. And so we have to think about the grid.
I love that you have that appreciation and knowledge, and unfortunately the experience, because the red flag conditions is something new to people across the country, but nothing new for those of us in the very dry West.
Be the Colorado River. Arizona is at the heart of our national defense when it comes to ship making, agriculture, and food security, and of course home to the 5th largest and best city in the country. In addition, 22 of the 30 Colorado River Basin tribes are in Arizona. So rules governing the reductions to the Colorado River water expire at the end of 2026. And post-2026, operation conversations are still ongoing. The lower basin states have put forward a proposal for management of the Colorado River that shares the risk among all states. However, no agreement has been reached, and leading to potential conflicts within the basin, which of course we'd all like to avoid. Would you work with Arizona parties and my office so that any determination post-2026 is not overly burdensome to any one state and is consistent with the Colorado River Compact? Well,
Senator, you bring up a really important issue, and this is with the 2026 date looming, coming forward. And of course, as you know, Interior does have some specific authorities relative to helping with the lower and upper basin. I would say, as a former chair of Western governors, I know that this has been a battle that's going on as long as there have been people in the West. People are fighting over water in the West. My experience in North Dakota has been more on the Missouri River Basin, but also we've been in some deep battles with Canada because we've got 2 rivers that are in North Dakota that actually flow north into Canada, the Souris River and the Red River of the North. So whether it's international or the complexities of the Missouri, I've got some good understanding and good exposure to this, but I think you can count on that we're going to look for a collaborative solution that serves everyone. It's going to also, we're going to have to look for innovation on ways on the conservation side, because we can't make more water, but if we can use what we have wisely, that's going to look for the best solutions for all. But I appreciate that you're engaged in this. I know how important it is to Arizona and its economy.
Mr. Burgum, I think you know from our visit in the office how strongly I feel about these clean energy tax credits. I wrote this package, $400 billion or so, the biggest investment in fighting climate change in American history. This is what your thoughts.
Well, Senator, I really enjoyed our discussion and the time and the extra time we spent together. And I, as I said then, would restate now that I think your principles are really sound about being, technology neutral, about having carrots versus sticks, and also about having, private sector versus just all government.
I ought to quit while I'm ahead.
Yeah, well, that was all good. I mean, it's all good stuff. I think if I don't know specifically other comments you may have heard, but I believe that these things may have been so successful as it relates to the electrical grid that have got now a significant imbalance in the amount of projects that are intermittent and not persistent, and we need to make sure for our country to be successful in the near term that we've got to get back to making sure that we've got the appropriate amount of base load to manage both of those things. Because if the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, and we don't have base load, then we got brownouts and blackouts. We got higher electric prices for every American. So it's the balance of trying to achieve that. And then the other point that I may have said today, which I would stand by, is that it's great that people thought, hey, let's put massive incentives around EVs, around electric vehicles, against fueled cars that have liquid fuels. But in America, if there's innovation neutrality in North Dakota, we're producing carbon negative barrel of oil. We're producing carbon neutral biofuels. I mean, America built 200,000 gas stations without a dime of public money or taxpayer incentives because the market created that. And we have got an opportunity to have innovation in an innovation lane around decarbonizing liquid fuels. But so we just have to make sure we have the balance, because we need it all. We need it all to win the competition we're going to win.
The fact that public lands represent a massive public asset, and yet a lack of an accurate valuation is something that we don't have, and that undermines informed decision-making about their use and their management. What steps would you take, if confirmed as Secretary, to improve the transparency in this area and ensure federal land valuations reflect their value to the American people?
Well, I would just say on this idea that what I'll call America's balance sheet is something that the Trump administration has quite a bit of enthusiasm in discussions with Treasury nominee Scott Bessent, Commerce nominee Howard Lutnick, and even Speaker Mike Johnson called me a few weeks ago and said, hey, what's this American balance sheet idea? I mean, I think for our standing in the world, for us to talk nonstop about what our liabilities are, we should also be fluent, just as any business would be, to be able to talk about what our assets, and the assets of this country, I think, outpace any place in the world because of the care that we've given, in particular to the public lands, the surface, the subsurface, and the offshore. And we've proven time and time again that we can do it better, cleaner, and safer than anyone else here. If I'm a timber company and I own timberland and it's not been harvested, I put that on my balance sheet. If I've got timberland and I've planted young trees, I put it on my balance sheet at a different valuation. When we protect U.S. lands and then don't cut a tree and then they burn down, we not only produce enormous amounts of emissions and enormous amounts of carbon, but we also have effectively wasted the public's asset. And I think it's part of our duty in the role, if I have the privilege of being nominated here, but all of us as elected officials, to make sure that we're getting a return on the nation's balance sheet for the benefit and the use of the American people. Great. So understanding that number, I think, is key.
Governor, Senator Daines mentioned a very specific challenge with the Endangered Species Act, but as a governor, you know that one of the best ways to head off those conflicts is to prevent species from ever being listed by recovering them through proactive voluntary conservation at the state level. Senator Tillis and 9 of his Republican colleagues and I have a highly bipartisan bill called the Recovering America's Wildlife Act that helps states do exactly that. And in fact, North Dakota's former Game and Fish Director, Terry Steinwand, was one of the architects of that legislation. It's got strong support from the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, from many of the conservation groups that you mentioned in your exchange with Senator Justice. Does that sound like the kind of approach that you could work with Senator Tillis and I on?
Absolutely, Senator Heinrich. I think that, again, super sound principle there, which is to do the work to keep it off of the any kind of federal designation, working collaboratively with the states. I had the pleasure of working with our Game and Fish Commissioner, Terry Steinwand, for 6 of my 8 years as governor. He had almost a 40-year career in wildlife management. It's people like that I know and respect across all the states. I know you've got them in New Mexico. I know we've got them in Utah. I mean, the people that work in game and fish at the state level that are working on these things. I haven't met somebody from the federal level that flies into North Dakota that cares more about the soil, the air, the water, the fish, the wildlife than the people that we have at the state level. And we should just, this sounds like you're entrusting this back to the states, and that's where it belongs.